Ooh, I thought the All right. So, my name is John. I'm here with Jared, and we were going to record a conversation. Jared and I have talked a couple of times, and I was just super impressed by, first of all, just the connection that we had, you and myself, just having been through a lot of similar experiences. And it's always nice to meet someone and be able to share those similar experiences, even if they were tough, because, like, okay, yeah, I'm not alone in this. And then also just working in apartment ministry, we had some overlaps there, and then trying to figure out how to get churches involved in that. So why don't we start by I'll let you introduce yourself, tell us whatever you want to share about yourself, the big important things about yourself, maybe how you met Jesus, how you met your wife, and a little bit about your background. So yeah, tell us who you are.
Sure. So Jared Milam, um, let's see, met my wife back in Bible college. We've been married for coming on 15 years here in June, and we've got 3 kids. Got a dog. We're in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex area over in Texas. So um, we let's see. So how I met Jesus, I grew up in church. I mean, I don't remember a time that we didn't go to church as a kid. My parents were pretty faithful about that. Was always the good kid, what do we say down here in Texas? I didn't smoke, drink, or chew, or go with girls who do. That was
That's all right. That's good.
the thing. Sorry, I think my dog's in the background. Good grief. You can see him popping up over my
That's
head. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's my
That's
fake back.
okay. That would be great. That would be awesome if this
Get off.
dog popped up
Get
over your
off.
head.
Oh my gosh.
Was the
Um,
dog on the couch there? I could see, yeah, you don't want the dog getting
that would have
thrown
been
like
really funny. Um, yeah. So I was always like a good kid, right? I did what I was supposed to, didn't do what I wasn't supposed to. Um, the good church kid, but it was high school for me. I was really involved in my youth ministry. Had a youth pastor who created like a student leadership program, and I never thought that I would be that, right? I never thought that I was never cool. I always thought you had to be cool to be a leader, right? And so I didn't think that would ever be me, and got challenged by that youth pastor to step into that. And then right before I started my junior year, I was in a bicycling accident, like ruptured my spleen, all that stuff.
Ooh,
And doctor
ouch.
said that I should have died. Like it was a whole big thing, like life-saving surgery. And so she said, I don't believe in God, but you should be dead.
Wow.
The only reason you're alive is because some higher power decided that you are. And I was like, oh,
Wow.
okay. And so wrestling with that as like a 16, 17-year old, first it was selfish and depression and like, why did this have to happen to me, God? You ruined my junior year of high
Mm,
school. I was going to get my license, like all that stuff, right?
mm,
Um, and it turned into, after like a year of that, it turned more into thinking more about what that doctor said and um,
mm,
why would God save me? Because
mm.
again, I wasn't a bad kid, but I was going to go live the American dream and do whatever go pursue that. And God could come along for the ride, right? I was always going to go to church in my head. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
go to church. Like I'll get married, have kids. We'll take our kids to church. We'll be good. We'll give our 10% and that kind of stuff. But it was just going to be, I'm going to go to school, get a degree, get a job, and live my life and live the American dream. And God can come along for the ride. And I started asking, like, God, I wasn't really gonna like do anything for you. Why would you
Mm,
seek to save me? And
whoa.
so it was like at that
Wow.
point I realized it became very real for me. Like Second Corinthians 5:15 became very real for me. And he died once for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for
Mm,
him who died
wow.
for them and rose again. And so that became like oh, all of my time from here on
Mm,
out is borrowed time. I should be
yeah,
dead.
yeah,
This doctor who doesn't even believe in God used a miracle
yeah,
to save me.
yeah.
So I mean, the least I can do
Uh-huh.
is okay,
Mhm.
God. The rest of this is whatever you decide, not what I
Okay.
decide. And so that's what set me off in going into ministry. So I went to small little Bible college in Dallas called Dallas Christian College.
Hmm.
That's where I met my wife. That's where I met my wife when we graduated. I did youth ministry for 5 years in Fort Worth. I took a position as a associate that very quickly turned into senior pastor role at a
Yeah, I
church
remember that
that I
story you told me. I was
that
like,
I
oh my
didn't
God,
know was
what a setup.
dying.
Dude,
I
that's gotta
didn't
be
know it was
another
dying.
that's another interview
Uh,
right there. Just like
the
the
senior pastor
setup.
just like threw me the keys on his way out the
Oh,
door and this
sheesh.
boat that's sinking. So I was there for like a year and a half before, honestly, that church closed its doors and learned lots of
Yeah.
lessons, right?
Yeah,
And
hey,
then, and
that's
then
a good way
that
to
was in
look at
Houston. We moved
that.
back up
That's a
to
good way to
Dallas.
look at that. It's a
Yeah, it was a lot of lessons. But
nice.
through all of that, probably like 3 years into being a youth pastor, got really involved in apartment ministry. Got connected with a ministry called Apartment Life.
Okay.
And I mean, really, my wife and I, um, before we even got connected with Apartment Life, it was one of those like, hey, babe, I think we need to have a talk. And she's like, I need to talk to you about something too.
Uh-huh.
And okay, well, you go first. No, you go first. And I don't remember who went first, but that person said, I feel like God wants us to do apartment ministry. And the other person said, that's the exact same thing I was going to say to you.
Wow.
And those
Had you been
moments,
to
those
some
moments are
kind of
super rare.
had you been to some kind of like, okay, you go to church and someone from apartment ministry shares something and you come home and over the next couple of days you both
No,
share this? So like how did you even know about apartment
no.
ministry?
So, I mean, like we had some apartment communities near our church building, and I worked at a church. I was a youth pastor, and we used to take our students to go like anytime we would have a fall festival or like an Easter egg hunt for something for the community. Right, we would go a Christmas Eve service. We'd go hand out flyers to this
Okay.
apartment community down the road and invite people to come. And that was about all we ever did there. There was another apartment community that we got connected with as well, and we'd pile into the white church van, people from the church, and show up, and we cook some hot dogs and hand out some bags of chips, and I would set up a game for the kids to play on the tennis courts. But that was about, and we maybe did that 4 times. That was
Wow.
the extent of that. That was the extent of
Okay.
that. But we lived in apartments because I mean that was all we could afford. And we just really wanted to reach our neighbors. And we had tried
Mm,
a couple of times, like a neighbor would move in and we would bake some cookies and take it to them and like knock on the
nice.
door and they'd be like, who are these psychos standing outside my door? Like people didn't want to, yeah, I'm pretty sure we gave them the cookies and then they would throw them in
Yeah.
the trash thinking that we put something in them. Like it was people, they just didn't like it. It was weird
Wow.
for people. We
Yeah,
would see a
yeah.
moving van. I might take the dog for a walk on a Saturday morning, and there'd be a moving van, and people are moving in. I'd go introduce myself. Man, do you guys need any help? Like moving some stuff in? You got some heavy stuff? And they'd be like, who are you? Oh, man, we're your neighbor. We live over there on the third floor. Yeah, we're good. Thank you. And just people were weirded out by it. But we felt
Wow.
this like we just really wanted to get to know our neighbors
Uh-huh.
and I don't remember there being a specific thing. We hadn't even had conversations about it before outside of our attempts to connect with neighbors. And we just
Uh-huh.
said like we had this conversation. I feel like we're supposed to do this. And
Okay.
so yeah, it was crazy. And so it was after we had that conversation, we started pursuing what that might look like that
Mm-hmm.
we found out about apartment life and what
Mm-hmm.
they do. And so we interviewed and became an apartment life team. And we were in Fort Worth for 2 years until I moved down to Houston to be
Can
a
you
senior
share a little bit
pastor.
about what that was like, working with Apartment Life, and what was the arrangement you had with them, and what were the expectations? I've interviewed some other
Sure.
Apartment Life cares coordinators before. um, some CARES coordinators who served up here in Edgewood, Washington. That was actually my first interview that I did for my project. Was somebody who had served with Apartment Life. So share with me a little bit about
Okay.
what that was like.
So it's changed a little bit since then, but what our responsibilities were, we lived on site and got
Mhm.
like discounted rent for doing what we did. But our job essentially was to be event coordinators for community events. So like the purpose of the business purpose of apartment life, like why apartment communities would want them there, is it costs a lot of money to flip an apartment and make it
Mhm.
ready for a new tenant. And you would prefer to just have people sign their lease again and stay another year.
Yep.
Um, but sometimes rent goes up, people decide they want to go down the road. But if people feel like this is their community, they have friends,
Mhm.
these are their
Mhm.
neighbors, it's harder for people to want to rip that out and start over somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so the idea behind it is if you can create community,
Uh-huh.
um, then people are less likely to move. And so the business pitch to an apartment community for apartment life is we will in the long run end up saving you lots of money. So you'll pay a small
Okay.
amount to have us here, but your tenants aren't going to want to move, or not as many of them will want
Cool.
to. And you could just re-sign people. So we would put on 3 events a month.
3 events per
Um,
month.
3 events per month. Yeah, it's two
Wow. That
now, but
how
it was
many units?
three,
How many units
three,
was the comp?
364 units was the
So
complex that we were in.
364 units. Okay. And
Hmm.
you got you said reduced
And
like by half or whatever. Like was it half rent? Was it
yeah, so like
almost like living for
it's,
free or
I think we were paying like, I mean, we should, in a unit that should have been like 1,500 a month, we were paying like seven,
okay. So about half.
something like that. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
It's
And then you
actually,
had a
it's usually a
budget to
little
do
over
your
half, but
events.
yeah, the apartment community has to give you a budget to do the events. So I think we had like, I mean, at one time it was only $300 a month to do 3 events, not per
Wow.
event, for total. And then
$100 an
the
event.
person who worked at
Okay.
Apartment Life, it was like, hey, your budget should be five. And so then we had a $500 budget. That was way better. We thought we were like, oh man, you have no idea what we can do with that. And so we learned to put on events
That's
for like
cool.
inexpensive. And
Yeah.
but I mean, we would do things like in the summer, like a pool party, barbecues outside. We would try to get like tenants involved. So we had a lady who was from Japan and she knew how to make sushi, and so we got all the supplies and she led a sushi making class
Oh wow,
for
sushi
everyone. So we
making.
learned to like roll sushi, and she taught us that like in Japan, fish is still expensive and only wealthy people eat fish. Normal everyday people are rolling like sandwich meat, like ham,
Oh wow.
into your sushi roll. And like, so she taught us that kind of stuff. We had another guy who was a chef and he did like a French, uh, escargot tasting type of thing. Like he made snails
Whoa.
or whatever. And it was like,
Wow.
dang. So that was a lot of
That's
fun.
very
And
interesting.
we didn't have to pay him for it, so we could afford it, right? He volunteered to do it because he lived
Yeah,
there. We just bought the
that's a great
supplies. He told us what to
idea.
get.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Uh-huh.
we would do things like, uh, I mean, obviously, like a fall festival at the community. When Easter came around, like my favorite event that we ever did was an adult Easter egg hunt, and we would do it at night, and we would
Mhm.
legit hide these eggs. Like it wasn't eggs in a field; it was like we
Uh-huh.
hid these
Uh-huh.
eggs, but we would go buy and get donations for like
Uh-huh.
Starbucks gift cards, and we would have one grand prize golden
I
egg that we would
love
hide.
that idea because,
Oh man,
during Easter, you see all these kids running around getting all this candy. And it's like, okay, dad tax or whatever. And then your kids have this bad view of dad tax. And it's like, come on, I just want some candy. And so they get to have all the fun, but I love it. That's a really cool idea.
what? And we were for the adults. It wasn't the cheap candy. We were getting like legit full candy
Good.
bars, like
Yeah,
that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
very cool.
So,
And you just hit it around
um,
the community. You just hit it in
you had
trees
like a
and bushes.
spot. Yeah, we had like a courtyard type of spot in our apartment
Okay.
community that we would do this at. So we would hide it around like in the bushes and the trees and stuff like that, and around the
Wow.
pool, and we did it at night. we did it at night. So it wasn't after the kids' Easter egg hunt. It was a different day.
Right. No,
And
I
so
love
people
the
had to
at
like
night
use
thing
their
too.
flashlights to look around and
Yeah.
stuff. It was a blast. So
Yeah.
we did
Leave it
that.
to a
And
youth
then,
pastor. Leave it to a youth pastor to come up with something
oh,
like
yeah.
that because I was a youth pastor. I know you just learned to live in this space of creativity, taking night games and other games and putting things together. Every week you got to come up with a new game, right? So you kind of like learn to be really creative. So that's totally like that says youth pastor all over it. And I love it. I love
It,
it because adults love to
we loved it. It
play
was,
too. We don't play enough, you know?
we had a lot of fun, doing that kind of stuff. And then the other responsibility outside of the three events is we had to do what are called welcome and renewal visits. So when someone
Hmm.
new moves into the apartment community, every
Hmm.
month the apartments would give us a list of, hey, these are the new move-ins. And so
Hmm.
we had these little gift baggies, basically map of the community marked on there, like grocery stores, fun spots
Oh,
to
very
go, that kind
cool.
of thing. And we would knock on people's door and leave that with them, and just, hey, we're your apartment life team. We used to call them cares teams back in the day.
Hmm.
We're Jared and Kelly. We live
What
on
are they
property just
called
like you.
today?
We
Do you know if they're still called CARES
apartment
teams or?
apartment life coordinators or apartment life
Okay.
teams. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, and so we would say, hey, we're your cares team. We live on property. We're your neighbors, but we put on the events. Here's an event calendar of the stuff coming up next month. Would love to see you at one, and then ask them, like, are you from here? Is there anything? Some people didn't even want to answer the door. Other people were like, oh, this is amazing. But it gave us a reason to engage with people. Like, we weren't just
Yeah.
weirdos knocking on your door. We're officially from the apartment. We're here to welcome
Right.
you
And
to
a
the
welcome bag,
community.
coffee car or
Yeah,
card or
yeah.
mug or
We
whatever.
would usually give them like a five. I think we would put like a $5 Sonic or a $5 Starbucks gift card in there for them. And
Any other
then
ideas for what you put
renewal.
in the bag? I'm curious what you put in the bag. Any other? Because that's another thing that's like, I put coffee and candy that's kind of local. See, almond roca is made in Tacoma. And so
Hmm.
almond roca goes in our gift bags. And then Starbucks is from Seattle. So we put Starbucks, a little coffee in there. But so I try to keep it
So
like local stuff, but any creative ideas? Because I just feel like candy and coffee is.
so sometimes we would find, like, at one point we had a lady that owned a local cafe that lived in the apartment
Mm.
community. And so we would talk to them about stuff for those welcome bags. And it's like, hey, come by and get a free chips and salsa, or what, depending on what it was. And so we
Mm.
could ask, or we would ask local restaurants for that kind of
Mm.
stuff. Like, hey, do you have like a little goodie bag for people that just moved here to get them in the door of your
Yeah,
restaurant or your business or whatever? So
it's a
that
great
was
idea.
all some
I
of
love it.
the things that we would do. Um, and then the renewal visit was, they would give us, hey, these people, their lease is coming up in the next couple of months. And so we would reach out to them and ask them, hey, how have you liked living here?
Mm.
Are you planning on renewing or not? If not, why? Are there any issues or things that you would like us to
Wow,
make
that's
management aware of?
great.
So kind of like
Yeah,
heads it off at the pass for
right.
them.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
all of that we would write in a report, right? We always had a report anytime we would do one of those visits or an event, and how it went and that kind of stuff. So,
Sweet. So that's your apartment life experience. Now, in your experience, did you feel that the amount of work that you did, one of the things that I've seen over and over again with everybody that I've interviewed who's done apartment ministry is there is a huge burnout factor in this type of ministry. And they often felt like, and whether it was apartment life or any other organization or people doing ministry, whatever it was, pastors, youth ministries, any kind of apartment ministry, once they kind of get into it, there's just the workload kind of goes up and up and up, and you're still doing events, but now instead of the residents kind of know that you're available and they've got needs, and so great ministry, but it's just like the hours get way more than they originally thought. And so, or they burn out for some other reason. It might be something else. It might be there's a shooting and that kind of freaked all the volunteers out. I've heard that. But it seems like after about 2 years, people tend to move on to something else. Did what was it like for you? How long were you in it? And then what was the reason that you ended up getting out of it? And did you ever feel like you were getting burned out?
So we were at this property twice actually. So we were a team at this property twice.
Uh-huh.
We were there for 2 years, but then I took a job in Houston and moved. And so I mean, I'm not going to stay living in Fort Worth and take a job in Houston. So it's like five
Hmm.
hours away. The so that was the reason that we left. But I mean, when I lost the job in Houston, and that church closed, and we moved back up here, we were going to get involved in church planting, and decided to be a team again
Hmm.
because it was very missional, like
Yeah. Yeah.
great way to be involved in the community. If you're going to plant a church, that's exactly what you want. So let's be an apartment life
Yeah.
team again, right? And so we called apartment life, and they said, "Oh my gosh, the team that took over for you guys, because it's normally a 2 year commitment that you give. So that's part of the reason that that 2 year time frame for apartment life teams is what it is. They finish their commitment and they're done.
Okay.
Um,
Yep.
so that's part of the reason that time frame happens. But um, when the team that took over for us, it was like a year and a half later, they they couldn't fulfill their 2 year commitment. They were like, "We're
And
out. We're gonna go
they got
get out."
burned out basically, just with the
They got
amount
burned
of
out. They were going to go buy a house,
responsibility.
right? And
Okay. Okay.
it wasn't a bad neighborhood. It wasn't dangerous or anything. They just,
Okay.
you know, sometimes management changes, or you liked the manager before, but then somebody else got the job, and I don't like this person. I don't connect with them well, and it could be
Yeah.
difficult. Those things
Hmm.
happen. We had our tenure there. So total time we were there is 4.5 years. You know, we were
Okay.
there for two, gone for a year and a half, or yeah, almost 2 years, and then back for another 2.5 years after that.
Okay.
And
Did you
in
ever
our
feel like you
tenure,
were
I think we
getting
went
burned
through like,
out?
um, I don't know if I would say that. I mean, part of it
Okay.
is like my wife, when we took this uh job, she left her job and started teaching music lessons on the side to help make
Uh-huh.
some extra money. But we saw the decrease in rent as an opportunity to like let this be kind of her job. And so
Okay. So she really
she would fill out
put
the
time
reports and stuff
into
like
it.
that. Yeah.
And
And I
okay,
mean, we
she didn't
saw it
try
as
to do it on the side. Like I'll bet that some people who do part ministry is such a very side thing that yeah, it's gonna get burned out if that's like you're only
yeah.
thinking this is gonna be a couple hours a week and then it ends up being 5, 6 hours a week or whatever. But you managed your time well, it sounds like. Is that what
I
you would
mean, yeah,
say?
we did. I mean, we communicated well. I mean, we definitely learned to communicate better than we had as a husband and wife, that's for sure. And I
There's some
mean, when we
stories and
agreed to
lessons
become a
there about
team,
marriage.
well, when we agreed to become a team, we didn't have any kids.
Oh,
But it is a almost a guarantee that you become an apartment life team and you don't have kids, you're going to have kids. It just happens, right? And
interesting.
so I think we
Okay.
had been a team for like 4 months, and then my wife was like, "Hey, I'm pregnant," and
Hmm.
so
There's something in
we
the
had our
apartment
first.
life water, I guess.
Yeah, something in the water. It's a running joke at apartment life, but so we had our first kid and then got pregnant with our second one just before we left to go to Houston, and then we came back, became a team again, and got pregnant a third time
Oh my
with our
word.
third kid,
That's too
and
funny. Wow.
and the
And
third one
but
was
you
the
said that.
biggest surprise.
Oh, big surprise. Yeah, well, it
Yeah,
shouldn't have been a
yeah,
surprise because you should have known it's apartment life that does it. And so to some people, it does seem like kind of a mystery how babies are made when they say this is a surprise. I'm like, you didn't know how babies were made. And so, but although I gotta say, I have to be careful. I put my foot in my mouth sometimes with that joke because people said, well, yeah, we were doing XYZ or under just like crazy story. There's some stories about people who know how babies are made and yet at the same time still had a surprise. So anyway, back to you and your wife learning to communicate really well, you would say was the sort of maybe part of the secret sauce that helped you guys not get burned out. And then just
yeah.
making sure that you blocked out time to do all the things that you had to do to to keep the ministry and life balance. I don't, is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, and
Are there other things
what
or
I
other
could say
lessons?
is,
Man, I'd love to learn how to do that better.
so here's what I would say. The first time around that we were a team at this property, I was also a full-time pastor.
Mm.
And my responsibilities, when you're a youth pastor at like a 250, 300 member church, it's youth pastor at all, like, and everything else. And so
Yes, yes.
uh, you're the backup preacher.
Yeah.
I helped with the
That was the other
website
thing we
and
had in
graphics,
common, I think.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
just do youth ministry and whatever
Other
else needs to
duties
be
as
done.
directed.
And
Yeah.
correct. And so, um, what I've what I found there to be is somewhat of a. I felt like we were living almost dualistically in ministries. So I have the ministry at the church that I'm a youth pastor at, and I'm responsible for those types of things. But then I have the ministry at the apartment community, and I'm supposed to be
Hmm.
loving these people. Right? The purpose apartment life, the reason apartment life exists is not to just do events, but to give us opportunities to connect with neighbors so we can share the
Yeah.
gospel with them.
Hmm.
And um, really what ended up happening is we would do we were great at the events and the welcome and the renewals and all of that stuff and connecting with neighbors. And then it was basically like, hey, do you want to come to church with us? And that was it. And people aren't dumb. They know when they're being bait and switched, that like, oh,
Mm.
you only care because you were trying to invite me to church, type of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I didn't have much time to connect with people
Hmm. Hmm.
unless you wanted to come to church, because
Hmm.
I've got small group I've got to run. I've got this
Hmm.
ministry,
Hmm.
that ministry. And so we would invite like dads and their sons to the father son camp out. But I would never have been like, hey, you want to get the dads and the sons together, like 4 or 5 of us from the apartment community, and go do a hangout. That wasn't something
Oh,
our
so
church
they
was already doing.
complemented each other really well, it sounds like.
Um, well, the problem is that they didn't want to come to our church events.
Oh, I see. Okay, okay.
So that's what we were trying to do, was
But
make
that
them
didn't end up
complement each other.
happening.
But it didn't end up happening because nobody wanted to come. Nobody wanted
Huh.
to come. And so the second time that we were a team, we're focusing on church planting. And
Hmm.
so we're not actually like members of a church.
Hmm. Hmm.
We're gathering with our other teammates in our living room on Sundays. And, we were originally going to plant a church just in like the South Fort Worth part of town,
Hmm.
and use apartment life ministry as a springboard to do that. But what ended up happening is I went on a prayer walk and along the Trinity Trail, which is a long, like 15-mile trail in Fort Worth. And as I'm walking along this trail, there's all these apartment communities that are already there. And then they're building a ton more apartment communities along the trail. And
Hmm.
I just remember praying and asking the Lord, like, Lord, how are we supposed to reach all of these people in these apartment communities that are
Yeah.
closed off, right? They have gates and fences, and you have to know the code to get
Yeah.
in. And like, how are we supposed to reach all these people? And he answered me immediately and said, live amongst them. And I was
Wow.
like, oh. And so I
Wow.
came back and talked to our team,
Hmm.
and we
Hmm.
said, there's like 1,000 people that live in this apartment community, just this one apartment community, of which there were like
Wow.
9 on this long street that we lived on.
Uh-huh.
And what if we just,
A thousand unit apartment.
no,
That's
364 unit apartment, but about 1,000 people if you average about 3
Oh,
people a
okay. A
unit,
thousand people that live in that
right?
community. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
If like, if we just reached like even 10% of those people, that would be 100 people. That would be crazy, right?
Yeah.
But even
Hmm.
5% is 50, which would be awesome, right?
Yeah.
And so we just decided, like, instead of trying to plant a church out in the greater community, what if we just focus on the people in the apartment community? And what we found our second time around is that people weren't very willing to come to the church that we had worked at when we were the team, but they were very willing, more than happy to come into my apartment for dinner,
Wow.
into my apartment for church on Sunday morning for Bible study. Um,
Okay.
Kids were always happy to come. I mean, if we had food, kids were always happy to come over and they would listen to you talk about Jesus all day. Like it was not a big deal. And all the
Uh,
people in the community trusted us with their kids. Like, oh, you're going to the Milams? Yeah, go have fun.
wow.
Let me know when you get home. Like it was just
That is
crazy.
pretty cool.
And
That sounds rare these days, but you must have like had some they met you, they connected somehow, and then
I mean,
that
yeah,
comfort
we
level
would
was
meet them
there.
at events. Yeah, we would
Sure,
meet them at
sure.
events and stuff like that. And we had kids, so our kids are outside playing
Yeah,
and they're playing with
yeah.
our kids kind of
When the
thing.
kids
So
play together,
having
it
kids
does kind
helps.
of like it's a bridge. But
Yeah.
before you go on though, I want to back up just a little bit because I'm very interested in what you said a second ago about when you were doing events at the apartment complex and they met you, got to know you, and you would invite them to something at church, even if you'd built rapport, you know, it sounds like, okay, let's say you did, you'd been there a while, you built rapport, you've been there a year, they've been to a few events, their kids met your kids, and you say, oh, hey, you want to come to such and such event at church, and maybe even a fun event at church. And they're like, no, no, thanks, whatever, or maybe I'll come. They never show up. They're just being polite. Like why do you think that is? Any guess? Any or thinking that you've done on that, or I'm really curious about that. If you have some thoughts on that, I why is that the case?
So in my personal opinion and experience,
Yeah.
what I have noticed is that it doesn't feel like church is for apartment people.
Mm,
Um, so modern marketing is super important to most churches in today's world.
hmm
But
hmm
I mean, I've been through a bunch of church planter trainings and qualification stuff, right? I've done those before, and what they teach you is you got to have a target demographic, right?
hmm
Who do you want to reach?
hmm
And the biggest one, the most popular one that people choose is married men between the ages of like 35 and 45 with an average of 2.5 children, and they make a
hmm
certain amount of income, usually on the higher, when I say higher side, up, good middle, upper middle class type of income.
Sure.
Those people overwhelmingly don't live in apartment communities. They typically
Okay.
live in nicer suburban areas. They want a
Mm,
better school district for their kids, that kind of thing.
hmm
And
hmm
one of the rules of marketing is um, when you have a target demographic that you're gearing your marketing towards, it does two things. The first is it attracts the target demographic. It attracts
hmm
the people that you're trying to get to
hmm
come to your thing, to buy your product, whatever the case may be. Um,
Yeah.
but it also, effective marketing also repels people
Hmm.
who are not your target demographic. It's a rule of marketing.
Hmm.
And I mean, I'm a business owner, and so I would prefer that. I would prefer to only have people that want to come actually buy my service or product. And
Sure.
I would prefer to not have to talk with and deal with the people who aren't interested in buying my service or product, right?
Okay, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I hear what you're
and
saying. I
and
hear you
so
saying you want that
it's not,
sifting. There's a sifting.
yeah. Well, I mean, like I I want, if I sell sports cars, I want people who have the funds, the ability, and the
Yeah.
desire
Oh,
to buy a sports car to come to my
right.
car. I'm not gonna go advertise my expensive sports car in a part of town where
hmm
people can't afford it, or in a
hmm
part of
hmm
town that's not the group of people that would buy this type of vehicle. I'm going to put
Right.
billboards
Right.
up. I'm going to run ads in uh, whatever I want, radio, TV, whatever. I'm geared towards people who will
Geared
buy that. And
toward
so,
right.
as churches, when we pick a target demographic, right?
hmm
I don't think any church does it meaning to repel anyone,
Right,
but it's
right.
just a rule of marketing that
Absolutely.
when you
Yeah.
put a picture of on your website, right? When you put a picture of on your website or up on a billboard, because we have, I don't know if you guys have them where you're at, but we have churches advertised on billboards down here in Texas. When you put a
Not really in
picture of,
Washington, sorry.
okay,
Not
so we do here,
I shouldn't say
we have
never.
TV,
But
we have TV ads, we have radio ads, we have, and then obviously there's a website, right? And so the
yeah.
pictures of the people that you put on your website, the pictures of the people that are walking into the church, the kind of vibe that you're putting out there to attract a specific person, the
Hmm.
way that you decorate your foyer, the way that you've set up your campus, the way that you've done
Hmm.
all of these, the ministry offerings that you have, the way you set up your children's ministry, all of that is meant to attract a specific type of person. And that's
Hmm.
not, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. The
Hmm.
problem is that it also repels the person that's not that
Hmm.
specific person.
That's hard for me to
It just,
wrap my mind around, right? Because it's like, okay, but I totally believe you. Okay, just so you know, I think you're absolutely right. But it's still hard for me to wrap my mind around because it's like I I've been walking in my shoes a long time. So I am the product of all of what you're talking about. Okay. So it's hard for me to, and also I think because of my background, probably I was raised in a military family, been all over the world. So there's not like I'm used to going to unknown territory. I'm used to going into new places, new faces, new things, new circumstances. All my life, everything was new. And so, like, it's maybe that's one of the reasons why it's hard for me to wrap my mind around this is because, like, unknown territory, just like, oh, sure, cool, let's go, let's go adventure and try something new, right? And so that may be part of it. But like the other thing is like, okay, if something doesn't look exactly like if the people on the website or the brochure or the whatever don't look exactly like me, now that I think about it for a little while, it's like, yeah, I could see that. Like, if they didn't look like me and everything about it looked like, and it was a church kind of thing, like the only reason I would go is if I intentionally wanted to have a cross cultural experience. To be perfectly honest, so yeah, I get it. I get it. So
it's,
okay, so and so, but like if so, people who live in apartments, it's so subtle. It's so subtle. But I think, yeah, I think you're right. So but if they have never experienced church, or maybe they experienced church as a kid, maybe what they remember from church, I don't know. What are you fighting against there? It's like, did most of the people that you invite to something to church, did they have some church experience at some point?
so in Texas, it's hard to find people who haven't had
Who
a
don't
church
have
experience. I
a,
mean,
it's hard to
it's
find people who don't have a church experience.
increasingly as
No,
people are moving here from other parts of the country, we do run into it more that like I've never been to a church in my life. But
mm,
typically most people here are, if they're not going to church, they used to. If they
yeah,
grew up in Texas, they used to.
they're
They don't
they're
go anymore.
de-churched rather than
They're
unchurched.
de-churched.
And so
Um,
they have had some kind of experience, and so they kind of know what it's like and what it's about. And then,
yeah, and
and they've just
there is
been
literally
around the,
a church on
okay.
every corner.
Oh no, I believe it. And again, I've lived
Yeah,
in the South before, and so
yeah,
we lived in
they're everywhere.
Georgia. We lived in Georgia. Now maybe this reflects the geographic location and maybe a little bit the time. So this was a few years ago, but we had a prayer club in our church, in our school, our junior high. I went to junior high. We had a prayer club, and we went and teachers were there and the students prayed. So it was student led, right? It was student led, but at the same time, I mean, people talked about it. It was a thing, and so it was not unpopular to go to Monday night prayer
Oh
meeting,
yeah.
and so we used to go to Monday night prayer meeting, and so things like that were not unpopular. It wasn't like nobody ever said, "Oh, that's weird." It was like just, "Oh, I don't want to go. I went, and that's dumb," kind of thing. Like you're saying. So okay, so they have an idea, but when we think about people who live in multifamily housing, and first of all, we know that when we say multifamily housing, we're not talking about a specific demographic because multifamily housing includes the whole span of income. And so there's luxury apartments with all the amenities and all the things. And I know Apartment Life is in there and has quite a few clients that they work with that are on that end. And then all the way down to where most of the community is receiving some type of assistance and the rents are kept
Subsidized
low,
housing. Yeah.
subsidized housing. And so there's the whole gamut. And so I realized that, and that's one of the things I found in my research, which is why, um, you know, Grace Ann Goodwin says you shouldn't do apartment ministry. And so, and churches shouldn't even try because it's not a thing. It's not a thing because it's not a target demographic. If you do it because we're reaching this demographic that happen to live in a certain apartment. But anyway, back to but there's still, I think, in all of those places, 95 to 98% of people who live in multifamily housing don't have a church that they attend regularly. And that is across the board. That is something I think that's in common all the way across. Now, maybe it's for different reasons, because this group might be more mobile. And so they're moving for work, they're traveling for work, they're even at their apartment, whatever. And this group on the other end of the spectrum, they don't even have a vehicle to get down the road to a church. Well, maybe that's the reason. And so, but you're making friends with them, and you're building a relationship, and you have things in common, and they know your family, and they let your kids play in with your kids for hours over at your place, and still they don't want to go to something at your church. That's what you
Well,
found.
I mean, that's what we noticed.
Okay, no,
Um,
that's what you discovered.
it's,
That's
I
no,
mean,
that's good to know, man.
we
That's really good
had
to know.
we had a dad. Someone came to Easter service once with us, never came again. Someone came to, and look, I don't want to make it sound like we ran into every single person. We're like, hey, you want to come to church? Hey, you want to come to church? Hey, you want to come to church?
Oh
Like,
no,
we were
yeah, because
not the
then
serial
people will
church
find
askers,
out,
right?
and people will run when
Yeah, no,
they
like,
see you
I mean,
coming. That would be most
we were in,
disingenuous. Yeah,
yeah, we were intentional about like building relationships and then
yeah,
inviting people. But by and large, people are like, I mean, yeah, maybe, and then they wouldn't come, right? Because
right.
people don't want to say no. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, they're being
and
polite.
I there was a single dad and his son that lived like two doors down from us the first time we were a team, and I invited them to come to our father son camping trip, and they did. They did come to the father son camping trip, and then anytime after that we asked them if they wanted to, come to church or any of it. No, we're good. I mean, thank you.
Mm,
The camping trip was great. Thanks. I appreciate it, but no, we're good. And
hmm
so
hmm
it was one of those things that, we just, it just wasn't something that people wanted to do, was
Yeah,
come to your church. And I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if it's an overwhelming amount of like someone new walks in the door and everyone is like notices you and knows you're different and knows you're new.
Mm,
But that's for anyone that goes to one of those things. It's just we started noticing these things. And also, I'll be honest, having lived in apartments I've only owned a house for a year and a half, and that was when we were in Houston. Other than that, I've lived in apartments the
mm.
entire time. My wife and I've been married for 15 years, all through
Wow.
college, dorms and apartments, like all of that. And man, I've lived in decently nice apartments. I've never lived in luxury apartments. I've lived in decently nice apartments, and I've lived in some, wow, I can't believe I lived there apartments,
Yeah.
and everything in between those.
hmm
And
hmm
there was always a church putting flyers. Actually, I came home today, and on my door was a track, a gospel track,
A
right,
gospel
in a
track
plastic
or
baggie. A gospel track was on
a
there. It was like
chick
a flip
gospel
book with a,
track? A chick one?
yeah,
A chick? No.
yes,
Is it
it
really
was a
your
chick. It
chick?
literally was a
No
chick
way.
gospel track on the back. I was like, "Are you serious right
That's
now?" It was a
so funny.
cartoon. It was a cartoon of a
Oh
guy
yeah, I know
finding
what chick
out
gospel tracks are. I
that
lived in
he was going
Georgia.
to hell. Yeah.
Oh my
So it
goodness.
was one of
Oh,
those. Um,
You know what?
Just,
And God
oh
bless
my
them. You know
gosh,
what? Maybe we will get to heaven and we will just be like, there'll be this whole group of people. Yeah, I came to Christ through a gospel, through a chick gospel track, and it was cool. And I just, yeah,
hmm
whatever. You know what? I'm not going to judge. So there you go. But at the same time, sometimes it's like it's that book. I'm not equating it exactly, okay, but just the phrase that comes to mind is more harm than good, kind of thing. Can maybe I don't know.
it can
Uh,
be. I mean,
I
we get invites to churches on our the little clip thing that they put on the door, right,
yeah.
for the apartment community to leave you a note all the time. We get those all the time.
You do
I
get
don't know who
invites to
you think.
churches.
Oh yeah, they put little invites for Easter, for Christmas services, like all of that stuff.
Hmm.
Those are on doors all the time,
All the
all the
time,
time.
huh? I don't know that that's the same here in Washington, but I may be wrong. I may be wrong. I may
And
be wrong, but
I've wondered what it would be like if we moved to a part of the country that is more, it's more common to run into people who've just never been to church,
hmm
right? What
hmm
it would be like doing that, because I, a part of me suspects that Texas, the South, is going through what those parts of the country went through 15, 20 years ago,
hmm
right? Um, Churches are about to not be as common on every corner, that
Oh
kind of
yeah,
thing. I
yeah,
suspect
yeah.
that that's
Texas is
probably where we're headed,
yeah.
but
Well, and Washington has been notoriously one of the least church states in the country. And so you and I live really, as much as we have in common, it's funny, we live in these opposite worlds where um, I met somebody who had this is about a year or so ago. I met a guy, and we just I won't even tell you how I met him because it was kind of weird, but we ended up having lunch together, and he is an atheist, and he was just telling me about his atheism. He's a great guy, really nice guy, and we end up having lunch and connecting and things like that. But anyway, so you do meet more people like that here in Washington, and you can read the bumper stickers of what they believe, and so at the same time though, even in Washington, there is a very large percentage of people who, depending on what survey you look at or whatever, who say, "Oh yes, I would identify as a Christian. I think Jesus is good, and I believe in him," or something like that. And so
yeah,
it's still
yeah,
not it's still not unpopular to identify as a Christian, oddly enough. And I think actually that may turn it may get low and then back up again. But church is definitely that we are in the de-churched age, and the great de-churching has and is taken place. What is it? 40 million people who used to go to church 20 years ago don't. And so the churches have lost 40 million people. So the Great De-Churching, to read that book. But back to like the part, and we're going to run out of time here. So we're going to run out of an hour, and then so I have to pause and then come back to this. But I feel like, and so there's maybe a whole conversation just on why. What is it about people who choose to live in apartments, if they do choose, and people who end up in apartments for whatever reason, and maybe it's a gamut of reasons, just aren't interested in church. And so I think that when just listening to you describe your experience, one of the reasons that's mentioned in some of the research I've done, when you look at like a list of reasons, is they don't think they'll fit in. They don't think they'll fit in. And so that kind of comes back to what you were saying, is if the church has sort of their advertisement and even just the way they've come across and what people have heard about it and things like that, even if it's all either secondhand or just advertisements, whatever. And if they went and made a friend, they would just like love it. It would be great, but they're going off of what they know, right? And so I don't think I'll fit in. And I also have another theory. I wonder if it kind of is because there are some things sociologically that happen in apartments that, on one hand, um, you do live in close quarters with people, and you're seeing people a lot, and you're with people a lot. You're running into them in the laundry room, or you're seeing them, passing in and out, by the doors, or your kids are playing together, or you hear them upstairs, or you're whatever. You're just like you're surrounded by people. And but at least these are the people you kind of know who's going to bother you, who's not, who to stay away from, who are your friends. And so there is a sense of like, I have this group of people that I'm around all the time, surrounded by people all the time. And so to take a Sunday morning when maybe it's relatively quiet around the apartment complex because I'm really sleeping in. I don't know what it's like in the apartment complex on Sunday mornings. And so, like, to take my Sunday morning and go be around this whole other different group of people and not have a place that I could go into and kind of be a little bit in my space, I don't know, maybe that's just not what people who are around people, who live around people all the time want to do with their Sunday morning. And if they don't have a really good and compelling reason to do it, then they probably won't. So the idea of church and activities and events at this other place as a means by which people will be introduced to Jesus and his people, or Jesus, his people, and then Jesus, right? Just is exactly like you said. It's like the way we do this thing called church is not going to reach this group of people who are around people all the time. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
just tossing that out as a
Well,
crazy. What do you like? What
I
do you think? I don't know. In our last
I
couple
think
minutes here.
I think part of it is, look, if one, let's be honest, when we show up to church, um, there's an aspect of put on your best face,
Yeah.
right? There just is.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And um, good pastors, good churches encourage people to be genuine. Tell us when you're hurting. Tell us when you
Mhm.
need, like,
But not in the
but
hallway on Sunday mornings.
but on the whole, you put on your
Yeah.
Sunday best, right? I mean, even if you're
Yeah.
wearing average Joe clothes, you pick out your best average Joe clothes and wear
Mm.
them to church, right? And you show up and you sing the songs and you listen to the sermon. Maybe you volunteer in the children's ministry, or you're a greeter or something, and you do it and you go home, right? And then you show up to small group, and maybe in small group you're a little bit more vulnerable, but beyond that, you at least are trying to appear to have your life together.
Mm.
And when you live in apartment communities, and I am going to say this, having done so for almost 20 years,
Yeah.
that there is a stigma that people who live in apartment communities live there because they don't have it together.
Mm.
There's a reason, because the American dream is not to live in a high rise.
Mm.
Maybe like the luxury, maybe in New York City it is to live, because that's where everybody lives in
Right.
something like that, right? Or Chicago or whatever. But
But
by
not in
and
Texas
large,
where there's lots of space to build a
not,
house.
yeah. I mean, in most of the rest of the country, the American dream is a house with the white picket fence,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
That's
Yep.
the American dream. And when I don't live in that, it means for some reason
I think
I
you're onto
can't
something
have
there.
the American dream. And so
I
when I
can't come
show
up
up
with a
to a
down
church,
payment.
yeah, when I go to a church where the target demographic, the people that they put up there, and the people that I ran into, all, at least to a degree, look like they have their life together better than I. And now
Hmm.
you and I
Hmm.
know the richest person there could
Oh,
be an
nobody's got their
absolute
life
wreck,
together.
right? Like, it
Whatever.
doesn't matter
Yeah.
the finances, the skin color, the
Oh yeah.
gender, none of that matters in terms
No.
of
Yeah.
having it together or not,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
But for all intents and purposes, when it comes to the American dream, it feels like
Hmm.
these people have attained more of it than
Yeah.
these people. And look,
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I work in, like, the industry that I work my job in is in, like, insurance, residential insurance and stuff. And
Hmm.
when I go to
Hmm.
people's houses and tell them I know how to help them with their insurance claim,
Hmm.
and they're like, "Where do you live?" I only tell them I live in this part of town. I don't tell them that I live in an apartment, because
No,
they will
of
feel
course you
like, why
wouldn't.
are you trying to help me? Why are you trying to help me with my house when you don't even have a house? But I actually know how to do all of these things. I just,
Yeah, yeah,
I just have chosen to live in an apartment community. So I
yeah.
even feel the stigma. I even feel the, but John, I get asked all the time from friends who know me, who are they are dedicated believers. They love the Lord. They love what my wife and I are doing, but they say, when are you going to buy a house? When are you going to build? When are you going to build wealth by buying a house? Right, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I get asked it all the time, all the
Yeah.
time.
No, no,
Anytime
I can
something goes
imagine because
south,
you're that part in life as well. Once you got three kids,
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
time. If you haven't bought your first home by the time you have three kids, man, no, you know what? That really that makes sense. I think you're really onto something there because that actually, and we'll wrap up with this thought and we'll schedule another time to get together. But because that makes sense to across the board too, because even people who live in very expensive apartments, and I will have to exclude condominiums because if you're buying your apartment, it's a condominium, so exclude that. There's another realm of multifamily housing that maybe is different than this, but we're talking about rental apartments and rental, multifamily housing. And so no matter what place of the socioeconomic spectrum you're on, if you haven't come up with your down payment and started putting down roots and that kind of thing, then you're at some stage in your life where, even if you make a lot of money, you're doing it by having to travel and move and do this and that and all those things that's kind of unrootedness. And it's like, oh yeah, when I get married and have kids, then I'll settle down. I will find a house and buy a house and find a church and lay roots down and find a school district and something like that and start thinking about serving in the PTA. But until then, it's like, I don't want, no, I think you're right. It's that appearance of having things together in the American dream that we have all about that. Trust me. And that what you said, I'll also say like the having things together. I've been in some type of ministry for over 30 years working with people. And so people don't believe me when I say that because, I started like at 20, but now you know how old I am. But yes, it's longer than 30 now. But anyway, like everybody, nobody has their stuff together. Nobody's got their life right. Everybody's got their crap. Everybody's got their closet full of just crap. It's not even a skeleton. It's like it's really stinks in that closet. And people with money know how to dress it up better. People with money know how to put on a better face and patch it together so that it looks like they do. But and I've
well, it's
worked with people on that spectrum as well. So, and God's grace is there for all of us. I mean, that's the beauty of the gospel,
he
right?
absolutely, absolutely.
Zacchaeus doesn't have his stuff together, but he looks like he's got the rich tax collector and then the poor prostitute. They dress up their sin differently, but God's grace and the power of the gospel is there to meet both of them.
It's yeah. I think this subconscious thing for people is hard because I mean, John, if I get together with my friends that I went to Bible college with, I mean, we still stay connected some 15
That's
years
cool.
later, right? Um, we never go over to my place to hang out. We just we just don't.
Do you have the
Like we'll
space
go to
for
one of the
it?
guys.
Like, do you have a
I
big enough
mean,
apartment?
yeah. I mean, we have a big enough apartment that like I mean my kids are running around, but like we could have like four or five of the guys could come over, we can hang out, right? There's stuff that you could do.
Yeah.
But it's just not like we'll go um to Brian's house because he's he's got a backyard and stuff, and we can hang out back
Hmm.
there. We can hang out in his garage. I don't have those things, and
Hmm.
so don't hear me saying that to be like my friends suck. That's not what I'm trying to
Oh
say.
no, I don't hear that at all.
What I'm
There's
saying
no
is,
judgment on any of this stuff.
I mean, if someone offers their house, I'll just drive to their house. It probably
Yeah,
logistically is better, right?
sure.
But also, it's just like if we have friends who have kids and we want to get together, more likely if friends that don't live here, if they have a house,
Hmm. Hmm.
we're going to their house we're going to their house
Mhm.
to hang out. They're not coming over here to hang out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I want you to think about what that's like when you're trying to be a member of a church and you would love to host a small group. But
Yeah.
Bob has a 3,500 square foot house, and I have a
Yeah.
1,200 square foot apartment, which is a decent size apartment. But
Yeah.
Bob's house is bigger. It's nicer. Parking is easier on the street. It's hard to park in my apartment community. I got to give everybody the gate code. And it just kind of feels like I can never be, I'm always a step behind. It's just
Mm.
always a reminder that I'm always a step behind.
Wow.
And, you know,
So,
I think that
uh,
all plays a role.
yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, well, and I appreciate all that you shared today. And I'm learning so much. This is really cool. And I want to pick up the next time we can and talk about how, if everything we've talked about is true, then I think, which I mean, I think it is. I think we're just making observations of what's pretty obvious. Our analysis, yeah, maybe off a little bit here and there, but the observations of the data is right. It's right there. So if all those things are the observation of the data, then I wonder if there is some creative new, not necessarily new, but creative old ways of reaching people who live in multifamily housing in a way that will provide for them the same type of community and communion and rhythm and liturgy. And I mean, like there's something this you could be I'm not saying you can't be a Christian and you have to go to church. Please, you don't. I'm not saying those things are equal, but the idea of communion and worship and liturgy and all those things are important to being a Christian. And so, to create something that people who live in multifamily housing want to be a part of. And I think actually what you're doing is exactly that thing. And I'm looking forward to hearing that when we can connect again next time. Thanks very much.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. Thank you,
All
John.
right. We'll talk more later. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
No. Oh.